I'm Melissa Perry, in case there's anyone that doesn't know me. I'm a professor in this department. Dr. Pang has a very impressive list of accomplishments. He actually completed his BS in chemistry from Princeton University. He completed his MD from Tulane Medical School. He also did a preventive medicine residency at the Walter Reed Army Institute here in Washington, D.C. Over the esteemed years of his career, he served as an epidemiologist, as chief of preventive medicine at the Army Medical Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. He's a native of Hawaii. He has also served as a clinical professor at the University of Hawaii. He currently is at the District Health Office in Maui County in Hawaii, and he's speaking to us today as a private citizen concerned about pesticide use in Hawaii, and has a very provocative, attention-getting title. When does open air pesticide use become human experimentation? So Dr. Pang, we're glad that you're able to make it. I hope you could mention the film that is currently on tour. It was going to be shown here, I guess, here in DC, and you're going to have a panel, but that got canceled because of the gun violence protests that happened over the weekend. So if you just mention that film so that our audience can be aware of that, and we welcome you.
Thank you. I'll just start off with mentioning the film. There's a film that came out about a year and a half ago. It's called Poisoning Paradise. It's produced by people in Hawaii, hence the name Paradise. And it's been going around the film circuit for about a year and a half. It's won all kinds of awards. I went to the showing in Hollywood. It won Best Documentary, and it was supposed to come here. In the film, there's three physicians, to say, this is an experiment on people. Pesticides, where's the guinea pigs, this is an experiment. We go into detail, but the editors cut that, and they apologize to us to say that we really know it's an experiment, but we just wanted to bring up with the public the word experiment, human experiment. We know you have the ins and outs of this, and you can discuss it in the panel later. This is one of the ins and outs of really why it's an experiment, beyond the gut feeling that we're not your guinea pigs. We say this all the time, we're not your guinea pigs. But where does that come from? What does it mean? I had the pleasure of having lunch with three of you. You got to reduce this to the basic principles, then we build upon that. Otherwise, we're lost forever. I ended up giving this same talk, starting off in Connecticut to 300 farmers. Whoa. So I had to change it as I read their facial expressions. Then yesterday I was at CUNY, City University of New York University, the law school. So then I kind of looked at them, and the law guys have their own preferences, you know. And then now it's a School of Public Health and the medical people. The same bunch of slides, but I'll gloss over and zoom here and there because you don't want to hear certain parts or you want to hear other parts. But I will show you what I gave everyone else, because you should know what the farmers were subject to and what the lawyers are subject to. I keep changing this because I keep encountering different groups. Let's see. Point. Okay. So I just changed the topic. The topic is called Open Air Pesticide Use Has Become Unethical Human Experimentation. Okay. There's all kinds of issues here. Open air pesticide use. Well, how bad is it? What do you mean has become? It was okay before and all of a sudden it's bad now? Well, see that. And then human experimentation. Oh, what is that? We will talk about that. You get this feeling, I think I know what that is. We're guinea pigs. Well, you got to get a little more rigorous than that. This is Professor Perry. Melissa, she has this PowerPoint. In the PowerPoint is always embedded the audio. In case you want to hear it in full detail, what I don't have that much time to say. This is the reference I will use because this is the full text of the 1994 congressional hearings on the Cold War experiment done by U.S. military and universities on U.S. and Canadian populations. Everything they say I agree with, and it supports this position. I never had to use their report, but I was challenged. Well, that's just your idea, Dr. Pang. Why don't you go find somebody who agrees with you? I found people who agree with me. The U.S. Congress in 1994. Bernie Sanders was one of them. Okay. Now, let's just get moving here. This is the same title, but it ends with human experimentation. So let's try to define human experimentation and then move on from there. I just put this up is when humans put at, well, when humans put an unknown risk on other humans, so humans to humans. Now if you say, well, I know what animal experimentation is, yeah, that's humans on animals. So, you know, humans are put at unknown risk by other humans. Unknown risk is, it's either from the product, I don't know what product you have, or I know the product, but I don't know the exposure, how far it went. Whatever it is some unknown risk. Here's some examples. Tuskegee syphilis trial, this guy's injecting this woman with something of unknown risk. This one they knew, it was a placebo, but they gave them weird stuff too. This is the atomic test in the South Pacific Islands. Humans did this to other humans, unknown risk. You don't know the product, you don't know the drift. And then here, let's see if this works. Good. This is the volcano. If the volcano erupts, we don't know what's there, nature is running an experiment on humans. So sometimes nature puts you at unknown risk. But if humans said, no, you guys go there because the fishing is good, and you lie to them just to see what their effects are, then the humans are contributing too, aren't they? So it's human in nature, unknown risk. So the humans have a little aspect telling the fishermen, this is actually true. You go there, the fishing is good, and then we'll kind of check you to see if you get it. You can combine, and it's not really clear forward all the time. So I'm supposed to say, now that we settled this, let's look at what's ethical and what happened. Why did pesticides suddenly become unethical? Quickly, I'll go over this for you. This is time on the decade scale. This is magnitude. And we are trying to always analyze new things, products or interventions. We're looking at the benefits and risks. I graph for you. We can do one for benefits, but I graph for you the risk. This is hypothetical. This is your point estimate over time. We're watching some outcome, some bad outcome. And there's always the uncertainty. The lawyers hate this. But as we study it more, where you know more about it, you shrink the uncertainty or the confidence interval. One is the complement of the other. Now, let me get this right here. The lawyers hate this part too. At the very beginning, you haven't done anything. 0 out of 10. You're looking at, say, toxicity, death, 0 out of 10. Well, that's 0. That's the point estimate, 0. The statistical uncertainty, remember that, is between 0 and 31% binomial time. Of course, there's other uncertainties, all those confounders you adjusted for, but there's always uncertainty. And science narrows down the uncertainty. Except sometimes, now here this is. We see this all the time. You were doing real well, you kind of knew your product, and all of a sudden the whole thing blew up because you didn't take into account chronic effects, like that chronic thing of kidney failure. I know some of you study this in Central America. Do you mean that's attributable to glyphosate? Yeah. So now you add that in with all its uncertainty, and it's not straightforward that you're always going to shrink down the uncertainty as you study it. When you attribute new things, happen with cigarette smoke and cancer too. Okay, so that's what I call the time bomb effect, and you can't avoid that. Now, we're just going to same graph, but for us, I stress less the point estimate, and I'm watching the confidence intervals, the uncertainty. Because uncertainty to me means experimental. If you're certain of the harm, and it's harmful, then it's crime. It's not an experiment. But values is uncertain. So here we are. This is now, never mind that 0 time. Look how big the uncertainty is. Okay. Some people, the scientists, we try to do better science and shrink the uncertainty. And you publish, and this guy says, oh, look, it's really this, and I took up that compound, and we know more and more. And that's fascinating. You're rewarded for it. It's hard to do. I don't know it's hard to do. And it's impressive. But we took a little pause and said, hey, while you try to move forward, let's look a little bit back. Let's look at the size, not where we're going, but the size of the existing uncertainty. This is uncertain. I drew it uncertain. I didn't even give you a scale. The toxicity is uncertain, okay? And when you expose population to it, there's a bunch of individuals, and say this guy, you go and ask him, you know, this thing is uncertain. He says, does it include red, really hot? Well, no, it doesn't include red. So he'll say, it's okay with me then. His cutoff for uncertainty and experimentation is different than hers, who's blue. So, you know, you're pretty sure what it is or what it isn't. And she'll say, wait, not me. That thing is too uncertain, and I really want this honed down because I got a kid. So when you deal with populations, and you say, who is this too uncertain for? Who is it too experimental for? It would be nice if instead of we took the average of the community and just said, give it, because the average said yes or no. We took each individual's person. And if she says no, not for her. If she says yes, yes for her. And we do this in clinical trials all the time. We do cancer chemotherapy. Here's the risk, here's the benefits. Here's the alternatives, risk and benefits. Would you like to come in? She says no, the answer is no. She says yes, the answer is yes. You can do it. All right, that was pretty straightforward. Now we talk about the unethical part. Ethics really started, I'll gloss over this quickly. In the Nuremberg trials, it turns out the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese Army had done horrible experiments on humans. No informed consent, they just did it. Yes, they were grotesque experiments. For example, there were 12 by the Nazis, right? Heat injury, cold injury, radiation, malaria, everything. And a lot of times they said, this is for the good of science, and this is the good of the Nazi army. Cold injury. The Germans were dying in Norway because it was too cold. They couldn't revive them. So we sacrificed some people to study how to revive our own army. And when we learned how to do it, forever and ever, science, this is our donation to how to revive somebody from cold injury without killing them from any arrhythmia. So that was their contribution. And so these Nazi doctors, and to some extent the Imperial Japanese Army, vivisection, they were taken to trial after the war in the Nuremberg doctors' trials. There's the Nuremberg trials, Nuremberg doctors' trial. And they gave that argument. National security, war effort, we're not guilty. Contribution to science, we're not guilty. Nonetheless, the judges, mostly US-led, they said, you are guilty. Out of 21, 7 were hung, 7 life in prison, and 7 kind of pardoned because they tried to speak against them. All the trials were unethical. It's not like your trial was okay. Okay, so then they determined that national security, war effort, science will never trump individual informed consent. Because then they said, well, how do you do this experiment? We know human experimentation is important. They said you will do it under individual informed consent. You tell them what the product, who's going to do it, what's the risks and benefits to you, what's the risk and benefits to society, the indirect, what are the alternatives, what are the risks and benefits of the alternatives. That's the informed part. The consent will be freely given. No enticement, no coercion, and you can quit at any time. When the thing gets too painful, I'm out of here. This was adopted by the Helsinki Accord in 1964. The Helsinki guys just refined it. Number one, there's 10 things, right? One, when you do information, the informed consent, you better have done all your animal studies. You've got to do animal studies and tell them. When you tell them, please come in the study, they'll say, well, has anyone else tried this? You got to do it. If during your trial somebody dies, you tell the next guy, if you have open enrollment, so far we're okay, everything. You got to do all this stuff and all this. So they just kind of refined it. But the basic principle is informed consent. And the consent, there's no enticement, no coercion. Okay, that wasn't too bad. The farmer guys took a long time on that one. Now I know why. After all this, finished in 1950, the US military, maybe they didn't get the message. Between 1950 and 64, they did call the Cold War experiments. This was brought to a hearing in 1994. 30 years later. But the US didn't know about it till 1993. It was so embarrassing, or so upsetting, they didn't talk about it till it came to light, and immediately President Clinton called a hearing. That's that reference I give you. Now here's the prop I lost. I actually had a copy, I read it, there is such a document. 300 pages, the last 200 pages are just references. It is the best thing I've read in the last 10 years. In those days, guys spoke with integrity. The EPA was trying to, the regulatory agencies were trying to run around this thing and say, well, and things are important. They said, cut it, cut the crap. You know what we're talking about, lack of informed consent. Okay? good guys saying good things succinctly, and lots of food for thought to scientists, lawyers, farmers, and the public. Women of childbearing age, and men who have children too. I mean, men who are parents in summer. Okay, so what was these experiments? Well, they did release over communities of biologic agents over the Bay Area, Serratia. They did a single agent, cadmium, zinc, cadmium sulfide, over 16 plus areas. Well, really, it's 16 to 200. You don't know how much they did, but they have these 16 major areas of Canada, the US, single chemical agent. They released radiation over St. Louis, Minnesota. How much? Well, we don't know that. Then they did these individual clinical trials, mind control, LSD, trying to make kids stutter and all this kind of stuff, all secret, all without informed consent. So, they had a hearing on this. Here is the one specific, never mind about reading this, I just put it up to show you that there is such data. What I use most are pesticide spreading, and that's most similar to that yellow thing down here, zinc cadmium sulfide, single agent. So the military released in the air and in the ground. In Hawaii, we only release pesticide from the ground, so I did it ground to ground. They released at ground level, the ship, over the coast of Georgia and North and South Carolina. And in 3 days, the stuff had spread, you don't have to see it, 100,000 square miles. So when you draw a circle, that's 100 miles. In Hawaii, we're fighting for a buffer zone around the schools of quarter mile. This stuff drifts in 3 days, 100 miles. At least that's a whole island of any of our islands. Okay? And a pesticide will drift as long as its half-life. What's the average half-life we're using in Hawaii? 2 weeks to 2 months. Well, is that it? When the half-life is over, it's over? Medically speaking, in your body, 5 half-lives. So instead of 2, it's 10. 10 weeks to 10 months. That's how long you watch the drift. Okay, so there's such a thing, we saw it drift, and the military condemned this. Wow, that's bad. Here is the findings of the Cold War Committee. Not Nuremberg, but Cold War. They follow the Nuremberg-Helsinki Code of informed consent, individual informed consent. Wait a minute, you're going to drift the stuff over 1 million people? You need to say I need informed consent? Yeah, that's what we need to say. And you will see that in the report, it's a scavenger hunt of the report. Try to look for the guy, General Creasy. He actually said, yeah, well, I knew I couldn't get informed consent, so I just did it. And then if you're going to do it and you can't get informed consent, then you can't tell them. That's why he did it secretly. Well, he was condemned. That's cart before horse. If you can't get informed consent individually, the answer is no. Then they said that the community exposure is same guidelines as the clinical. The single people is the same as the community. Oh, they released some chemicals in the subways of New York. And they released some chemicals at National Airport. So there's no difference between exposing a bunch of people who are a bunch of individuals versus individual. Same thing. Then they said that because the CDC quickly studied zinc cadmium sulfide in 1995 to see if harm was done. I don't remember what they found. I don't think it was too harmful. Even if you don't find harm, or you do something which does people a world of good, but you didn't get informed consent when we didn't know at the time, that's unethical. Okay? So watch that argument. Next, they said national security. When we released, the US military did this with a university contractor. It is never, ever an argument to trump individual rights. What's the right? You're not to be experimented on without informed consent. I call that's your right. Yeah. They studied this. This is the neat reading. Mrs. Barrett, Mr. Olson. They went through the law schools, they went to the legislature, They got burned out. And in the end, they were told by their lawyers, you might win in like 200 years. Because these guys got such deep pockets and they're going to appeal. They claim that Congress don't expect any person or any little group to get justice. Whoa, then we can forget that, right? But then they said, who will safeguard this? Experiment with. Who's going to watch this? So the 16 regulatory agencies stood up. There should have been 17 Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but somehow they got left out. They didn't say anything. So you got the EPA, USDA, FDA, and HHS, that means CDC, OHR, all these guys. They said, oh, we'll follow this. We've been following it since 1976. Really? They said, well, we understand what it is, individual conforming consent. We can't actually prove that we've been following it because we don't have a mechanism or a law. So they guaranteed that they will follow the common rule. It's really the common federal rule. And if you look that up, that's nothing more than informed consent, codified by the Helsinki Accord of the Nuremberg rules. Okay? I added this. No enticement or no coercion. I added that. That is part of the Nuremberg Helsinki rules. But this was not pointed out by the Cold War hearing. I just wanted to add that because this is what we're facing in Maui. When the chemicals come out and people said, let's get informed consent. And immediately, the University of Hawaii Medical School says, Dr. Pang, do you realize how many jobs are at stake? You shut down Monsanto in Maui, 700 jobs. His uncle. It's not like coercion. You know how much this contributes to your economy in Maui? Calculated by University of Hawaii again. That's enticement. I added that. And ultimately, the rule of applying human experimentation doesn't really matter what your intent was to kill the plants, save the whales, control global warming. If there's a risk to humans, it falls under individual human informed consent. Okay, so that was their findings, except for the enticement and coercion. All right, here's Hawaii. Because I showed you the rules, I'm trying to follow. I'm going to compare our activity in pesticides to the zinc cadmium sulfide, single agent, what's called Operation DEW. So I'm going to compare that. Operation DEW had one chemical, zinc cadmium sulfide. We have 85 chemicals at one company. We went to court, there are 85 chemicals. All our chemicals are pharmacologically active, intending to kill or enhance killing. Killing of what? Pesticide, whatever the pest is, another weed, insect, fungus, whatever. Intending to kill, pharmacologically active. In medicine, because I had to do this, when you combine, and I don't mean chemically combine, but give two things side by side, like alcohol and barbiturates, you better study very carefully toxicity as if it was a new entity. Yes, I did it. I held other people accountable to that, and we discovered new things, just overlapping two drugs. Do you know how many combinations there are with 85 chemicals? There's a trillion, pairwise, triplicate-wise, 4 chemicals, 15, pairwise, triplicate. 15 chemicals, 30,000. Oh, what's the cutoff? Well, when is it experimental? I don't know, but it's up to the individual to decide, because we already decided. She gets to decide. Okay, so a trillion combinations. All untested. Only Dr. Seralini has started testing glyphosate and the formulation compound pairwise, and he's found stunning toxicity, synergistic toxicity. Now, sometimes you're not going to find synergistic toxicity, but he began to look, at least he looked. So you did 2 or 3, and there's a trillion left out there. What's the combination? Immediately we were challenged. Oh, come on, Dr. Pang. You think we put the same thing in the 2 things in one can and spray? At the most, we do 3. So Dr. Pang's cocktail is wrong. First of all, I never called it a cocktail. You guys did. Cocktail is a mixture of chemicals. Combination to me means the chemicals overlap. So although you spray them at different times, because you spray 3 times a day, 3 times a week, year-round, day in, day out. If the half-lives are long enough so environmentally they overlap, that's a combination effect. If they overlap in the environment, in the human body, that's a combination effect. And this is what the environmentalists are fear the most. What if the chemicals never see each other? Not in the tank, not in the environment, because you spray them different and their half-life short, not in the human body. Well, is there anything worrisome? Of course there is. The pathology. I'll give you the environmental problem we had. Some chemical was released, killed 50,000 sea urchins on the reef. 50,000 sea urchins. I mean, this is true. Well, how long does it take to protect the reef for the sea urchins to come back? Sea urchins are important to the reef. Well, I don't know, 2 years. In the 2 years, what if another chemical comes, the chemicals never see each other, but you kill off the algae? Well, it's the synergism of the algae and the sea urchins to give you the reef. So the chemicals never see each other, but the pathology overlaps. That's combination. I never said cocktail. I said combination effects. By the way, NYU, these guys are dying to say you're wrong. Dr. Pang, you know there's 85 elements with a trillion times a trillion potential combinations that may overlap, may have synergistic toxicity? Yes. You're wrong, really. My calculation is wrong. Actually, yes, I'm wrong. NYU published a report on 11 chemicals, and they found that the order that you give them in is important. It's not just the combinations, that's permutations. You know how many permutations there are with 85? That's a trillion to the 11th power. What is it, the 6th power? It doesn't matter. It's bigger than this. But to tell me I'm wrong, and to go cite somebody who says it's not a trillion squared, it's a trillion to the 11th power. Yeah. So you know this is true. You make the cake, the chocolate cake, there's 12 elements. Does it order important? Yeah, I don't think you want to put the frosting when you're baking the thing. But you get the idea. NYU showed that. All right. Oh, sorry. So here we are. The exposure, yes, we spray so much, so often. The reason for the Operation DEW, I guess, was national security. The reason we have been told for this chemical stuff is to support the GMO crops. GMOs intrinsically need more. This is to feed the world. Wait, that's a benefit, but that's not a direct benefit, not to me. So can't you do it to somebody else first, the guys who need the food most, and then come back to us? Sounds selfish, but you're allowed to do that. That's a legitimate argument for refusing to be exposed. And I'm not to badger people to say, well, you're not scientific, well, you're selfish. That is unethical too. To badger somebody who refused and call them for whatever reason, try to get the answer you want. Okay. We were told that direct benefits are local jobs and economics. That sounds like enticement and coercion. Then, there was a Operation DEW, they didn't tell anybody. So there was no question of how you did informed consent. On Maui, we voted, and the majority voted, slim majority, to moratorium this practice until we could study it. Look, I was glad the majority won. But if two guys had said no, are we supposed to respect individuals? So the answer is no. Okay. Now, do we have surrogates? Do we do informed consent for everybody? Well, here it is. In a clinical trial, we do informed consent. We did informed consent. In the water additive, Michigan, this is after their problem. They fix their water, or they say they fix their water. You tell me how you fix your water. Yes. Okay. You don't like it, you disagree, then you get bottled water. It's just a question of who pays. So that's almost like surrogate informed consent. You told them all about the water that you fixed it, and then they didn't like it, they can opt out. GM food, hey, there's a big issue. You don't like it, after we told everybody what it is and what it isn't, you don't like it, don't buy it. But it's got to be labeled. So that's really the argument for labeling. Once you label it, I don't have that much. Like cigarette smoke. You told people how bad cigarettes are, you continue to buy it. That's almost like surrogate informed consent, except for secondhand smoke. We'll ban that. And then the issue is airborne stuff. Look, I found that from Connecticut, guys. What's that? This is tenting of a house for termites. We put a chemical in, kills the termites in 3 days. His neighbor, oh, I don't like that. You don't like it? You saw him? You know what's going on? You know it's over 3 days? Go somewhere to a motel. It's just a question of who pays. Okay? Don't worry about this. We don't have enough time for that one. Okay? But there are a couple times where you cannot opt out. One is the live vaccine. In Bangladesh, we had a live vaccine for Shigella. I thought we could do these people a world of good. 2% said no in the village. Live, it's going to spread the village. So the village headman says, oh, come on, 98% do it. How about I talk to these guys? First of all, you were never supposed to know who the two are, because when I get informed consent, that's confidential. Just for that reason, the village headman wouldn't badger these guys. But no, don't badger. Even if they say yes now, the answer is no. Because you already know and you're going to badger them. Live vaccine, it's all or none for the community. Here's the other one. Drift, especially hundreds of miles. It's all or none. You cannot protect people. You can ask them to move, what, forever, because you keep spraying forever. Okay. Now, this is the reference. Show how you can blow it up. This is from National Academy of Science. And they said the major problem with pesticides now, or chemicals, those enhancers as well as the pesticide, is the combination effect. That's the fattest section of the book. The EPA is baffled how to approach this. They haven't approached this, but they plan to. The National Academy of Science says, yes, your plan is a little misdirected. Once you get over 9 chemicals, the EPA approach is wrong. Okay, but that's a major section and there's no resolution. This was done in the name of endangered species. I just applied to humans because it's the same pharmacology. This is a reference of the Cold War in all its Cold War experiments and all its ugliness. I put this up because, what, is this just Hawaii? Is the trigger point 85? Well, it depends on your community. Well, it depends on your community. It depends on your individual. 4 chemicals, 15 combinations, none tested. 15 chemicals, 30,000 combinations, none tested. Now, this is where I can get this straight. Now, that was 15 chemicals, 30,000. 30 chemicals, strawberries, non-GMO strawberries. I think it's like 9 billion. 45, the most chemicals of a non-GMO crop, maybe apples or something. Forget what it was, like 10 trillion. Okay? But you get it. Each community, you decide for yourself if you offer this to the individual. That's not true. It should be offered to each individual, regardless of what they think. All right. Here is the specific example. Flint, Michigan. There's kind of informed consent because they know what's in their water. If they don't like it, now that it's changed, they can buy bottled water. They can get the water whenever they want. Here is something else. This is important. A challenge on this. Dr. Pang, I thought you were against chemicals. How dare you not be against chemicals? I'm not against chemicals. I'm against the way they're used. One without informed consent, one with informed consent. Good luck trying to get it. But here's an example, organ transplant. Organ transplant is a miracle. Never mind how it's done. You gotta admit, taking this guy's liver, putting it in this guy, that's fantastic. But if it's trafficking without informed consent, that's trafficking, that's terrible. But if it's organ donor with informed consent, with Facebook's matching all these guys on the internet, that's wonderful. So it's not the product or the intervention, it's how you did it. Don't worry about this. This is the Nazi trials of malaria. Dr. Schilling was hung. This is me. He did good science. I kind of copied what he'd done. Mine was informed consent. I was rewarded. I wasn't hung. Now, this is second to the last slide. This is very important. I can tell you all these negative things I get when I present this. People on our own side, they said, well, you're for individual rights. Yeah. Individual rights without informed consent. Next thing, you'll be talking about the right to own guns. You're so individual right guy, you'll be gone. Well, let's get this straight here. This is, I'll get Dr. Bauer's mind, the refugee camps where I did my malaria trial on the Burmese border. These refugees are from Burma, Myanmar, in Thailand. They don't have a lot of rights. They can't leave the camp, they can't drive, they can't vote, they can't own a gun. But they certainly cannot be experimented on with. Here's another group, Juliet Prison. The prisoners don't have a lot of rights, but you cannot do experiments on them without informed consent. You can't even do experiments on them with informed consent because there's challenges that is not freely given because the warden is kind of, it's not freely given because they're being watched. Military, same thing. You don't do this right up front, then they're going to claim coercion because the commander said, hey, how come you didn't participate? Here is the Japanese guy executing this Chinese prominent politician. This is not racist. That's very interesting. The Nazi trials, if all you're going to remember is it was racist and it was gruesome, you missed the point, informed consent. They honor him. These are honorable gentlemen. He was doomed to die, and they said, would you like to give your body for science? That's unethical to even offer that. And then, of course, death row. Now, on the Nazis, Dr. Brandt, he was hung. He was the lead. And he said, well, when I die, I want my body, and they just put a bag over and hung him. They said, we will not even do an eye for eye on eye. What you have done to others, we are so ethical, we won't do it to you. Now, you know that's true, because we're having trouble with the capital punishment, the injections. It's not working and it's slow and torturous. Well, why don't we just test new drugs in them? They're doomed to die. You can't do that. You got to test it in animals first. or epidemiologically see that guys who overdose, that's the way to do it. So there are rules, there's a hierarchy of rules. And this thing, if you read this, that reference, you will come across repeatedly the senator saying, this boggles my mind, this boggles my mind. What does that mean, boggles your mind? They're using it like this. They're meant to be a regulatory agency. Let's just say the EPA. Remember, EPA is so big, there's good and bad apples in it. Now, they might measure your lead level in your drinking water to the umpteenth part per billion, track it over months. You're fanatic about looking at one aspect, but the EPA, when presented with this, won't even look at this. That boggles their mind. It gives a false sense of security that somebody is looking at this because you looked at that, but not this. You think that this can't be true. We're so obsessed with gun rights, immigration rights, all these other rights, sanctuary city rights. We certainly would have picked this up if it was important. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. And here's my last slide. I'm not against any product. I'm against it if there's not the right to choose, especially when the uncertainty is so big. We can all discuss how big the uncertainty is, but it's up to the individual themselves in the end. Okay, so that's it, the choice. Here is the 800-pound gorilla blocking this. By the US military was national security. We get to do what we want. Yes, you can do your informed consent little lectures, but since we couldn't yet, we just didn't do it. Well, that's ruled unethical in the US, by the US. Here is science. I learned from this, and forever I'm going to apply it to your family. So how about you just let me go, because that's unethical too. And finally, never brought up, not by Nuremberg, not by the Cold War, give money. They didn't even have to face this issue. Now, I wrote a letter to the US Congress, the surviving members, 8 of them. I'm waiting for a response. It's been 2 months. And I wasn't real nice, but you have to just be honest sometimes. You guys looked at bad experiments 30 years ago. You weren't really on the hot seat. The perpetrators are dead or retired, and the experiment stopped in 1964. In Hawaii, wow, they've increased, the acreage of GM fields have increased from 5,000 to 25,000 in 10 years. The perpetrators, or the people who use them, are just making the arguments of contributions to your economy. Uncle Joe's going to lose his job. You guys are letting this run amok here. But this is more than just who wins the argument. I firmly believe that this stuff, when it appears down the line, chronic effects, like all these moms are telling me, oh, look at all these birth defects. I know we can never prove it, Penny. We get the message. We can't prove it. But can't we just stop this? I think by the time you see birth defects, we probably all half sterile. So by the time you see this stuff, it might be irreversible. I'll just leave it at that. Open it for questions.